Imagine waking up as Prime Minister, strolling into your cabinet meeting expecting at least some semblance of good news, and instead having to face the absolute political horror show that is Labour sitting in third place behind both Reform UK and Conservatives. Third place. The party that won a landslide victory just 6 months ago is now polling at a pathetic 17%, trailing Nigel Farage's Reform at 26%, and even the Conservatives, who were supposed to be in political oblivion, at 19%. This is not just a bad poll. This is electoral Armageddon wrapped in statistical data. Sir Keir Starmer's response to this catastrophe? Tell his cabinet to ignore the polls and focus on hard work. Yes, that is right. When your government is imploding faster than a poorly constructed souffle, the solution is apparently to pretend everything is fine and just work harder. It is a political equivalent of a captain on the Titanic telling everyone to ignore the iceberg and keep polishing the deck chairs. Welcome back to British Mirror, where we document the spectacular collapse of political fortunes in real time. Quick favor, if you are loving this breakdown of Labour's polling disaster, smash that subscribe button right now. Over 94% of you have not done it yet. It is completely free, takes 1 second, and means a world to us. Cheers if you did. Right, back to watching Keir Starmer squirm as a political world burns down around him. Let us start with the brutal reality of these numbers because they are genuinely shocking. This YouGov poll for The Times, conducted on January 3rd and 4th with over 2,300 adults, shows Labour at 17%. 17. That is not just bad, that is catastrophic. To put that in context, Labour won the last general election with over 30% of the vote and a massive parliamentary majority. Within 6 months, their support has nearly halved. That is not a decline, that is a free fall. That is jumping out of an aeroplane without a parachute, and wondering why gravity seems unusually aggressive today. Reform UK is leading at 26%, which represents a culmination of months of steadily rising support for Nigel Farage's party. They have been storming the polls, as the report notes, and this latest survey is just more confirmation that they are tapping into something real in British politics. Whether you love or hate reform, you cannot deny they are connecting with a significant chunk of the electorate in ways that traditional parties are not. They represent anti-establishment sentiment, frustration with immigration policy, dissatisfaction with economic conditions, and a general sense that the political class does not understand or care about ordinary people's concerns. That message is resonating, clearly, but here is what will really terrify Labour strategists. The Conservatives, who were supposed to be finished, who lost catastrophically in July, who went through multiple leadership crises and looked politically dead, are now polling ahead of Labour at 19%. The Tories, the party everyone thought was done for a generation, they are beating the sitting government. Think about how extraordinary that is. Keir Starmer has only been Conservative leader for a few months. Her party is still recovering from years of chaos and unpopularity, and yet they are outpolling the government. That should be impossible. But here we are. The Liberal Democrats are at 16%, just 1 point ahead of the Greens at 15%. So you have got a political landscape that is completely fragmented, with no single party anywhere near majority. But the key story is Labour's collapse. They have not just lost support to one rival, they are hemorrhaging votes in all directions. Some voters have gone to Reform, some to the Conservatives, some to the Liberal Democrats, some to the Greens. That kind of multidirectional exodus suggests deep, fundamental problems rather than specific policy disagreements. People are not just unhappy with particular Labour decisions, they are rejecting the entire package. Sir Keir Starmer is clearly aware of how bad this looks. At the first cabinet meeting of 2026, held on Tuesday, he tried to rally his troops with what can only be described as a combination of denial and motivational speaking. He told his senior ministers, "I do not underestimate the scale of the task, but I have no doubt about this team. Governments do not lose because polls go down. They lose when they lose belief or nerve. We will do neither." That is classic political leadership language when things are going badly. Acknowledge the challenge. Express confidence in your team. Insist that belief and determination will overcome the obstacles. It is not wrong necessarily, but it also does not actually solve any of the underlying problems causing the terrible polls. The line about governments not losing because polls go down is particularly interesting. Technically, he is correct. Governments lose elections when people actually vote against them, not when polls predict they will. Plenty of governments have recovered from terrible polling to win elections. It is possible. But here's a problem with Starmer's logic. Polls do not just measure current voting intentions. They measure public mood, confidence, approval. When your polls are this bad, it means people are deeply unhappy with you. And unless you address the reason for that unhappiness, unless you change course or change messaging or change something fundamental, those polls will eventually translate into actual electoral defeat. You cannot just ignore them and hope everything works out through sheer force of will. Starmer also urged cabinet discipline and a focus on tackling the cost of living, which is at least focusing on an issue that genuinely matters to voters. Cost of living is the number one concern for most people. Food prices, energy bills, housing costs, wages not keeping pace with inflation, these are the things that determine whether people feel better or worse off under a government. If Labour can demonstrate real progress on cost of living by May, they might limit the damage in local elections. But that is a big if. These are structural economic problems that do not have quick fixes. You cannot just declare you are tackling cost of living and expect voters to be satisfied without seeing actual results in their bank accounts and shopping bills. The political meeting, by the way, took place after an official cabinet meeting that lasted less than 10 minutes. 10 minutes! That is barely enough time for everyone to sit down and have a cup of tea, let alone discuss serious policy issues. It suggests that the real business of government, the official work with civil servants present, is being rushed through so they can get to the political strategizing about how to save their electoral skins. That is not necessarily wrong. Politics is part of the job. But it does paint a picture of a government more worried about survival than governance. 68%. More than two-thirds of the country actively disapproves. Just 12% said they approved. 12%. That's not just unpopular. That's historically, catastrophically, career-endingly unpopular. Another poll in November showed half of Labour voters want Sir Keir to quit. Half of his own voters. Not opponents, not swing voters, but people who actually voted Labour in July 2024 now think he should resign. When your own supporters have turned against you, you've got a problem that can't be fixed with better messaging or policy tweaks. You've got a fundamental crisis of confidence. Sir Keir's future at number 10 is likely to be decided on May 7th when elections will be held for the Welsh Senedd, Scottish Parliament, and local authorities in England. May 7th. That's the real deadline. Not 2027. Not the next general election, but May 7, 2026. If Labour gets hammered in those elections, and all evidence suggests they will, the pressure on Sir Keir will become unbearable. Backbench MPs facing decimation in their constituencies will start demanding change. Party donors will panic. The media will declare his premiership finished. He might survive, but he'll be mortally wounded, a zombie prime minister limping towards inevitable defeat. Labour currently leads the Senedd, but is expected to get a drubbing at the polls in what would mark an historic defeat for Welsh Labour, which has been in power since devolution began in 1999. Since devolution began, Labour has controlled Wales for a quarter century. If they lose that stronghold, it's not just politically embarrassing, it's symbolically devastating. It would signal that even in Labour's traditional heartlands, even in areas that have voted Labour for generations, the party is being rejected. That's not a temporary blip. That's a fundamental realignment. While Sir Keir and his cronies are emphasizing stability and talk of efforts to ease the cost of living, others are waiting in the wings to take the helm. Waiting in the wings. That's diplomatic language for sharpening their knives. Health Secretary Wes Streeting, Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood, and Mayor of Greater Manchester Andy Burnham have all been reported as harboring leadership ambitions. Harboring leadership ambitions. That's a delicate way of saying they're positioning themselves to replace Sir Keir when, not if, he falls. These aren't idle rumors. These are serious politicians with significant support bases calculating when to make their move. Wes Streeting is particularly interesting because he's been remarkably visible and outspoken for a health secretary. His take on the NHS, the unions, and vested interests with a boldness that contrasts sharply with Sir Keir's caution. Whether you agree with his positions or not, he's demonstrating political courage and clarity that makes him an obvious alternative if Labour decides they need a change. Shabana Mahmood as Home Secretary is handling some of the most contentious issues around immigration and law and order, giving her visibility and authority. Andy Burnham, meanwhile, has cultivated an image as a successful regional leader who actually delivers for his constituents, offering a contrast to Westminster dysfunction. The fact these names are being openly discussed as potential replacements, while Sir Keir insists he'll still be Prime Minister next year, tells you everything about how weak his position actually is. Strong leaders don't face constant speculation about their successors. Secure Prime Ministers don't have to repeatedly insist they'll still be in post 12 months hence. The very fact that Keir is making these statements reveals how precarious his situation has become. His not projecting strength. His desperately trying to stave off a leadership challenge he knows is coming. What makes Sir Keir's position particularly tragic is that he won such a massive majority, 411 seats, a parliamentary landslide, the kind of majority most politicians dream about, the kind of majority that should give you freedom to implement your vision, to take bold action, to transform the country. Instead, Sir Keir has squandered that majority through timidity, poor communication, and policies that alienate both his progressive base and the working-class voters Labour needs to retain. He has managed the extraordinary feat of uniting both wings of his coalition in disappointment and frustration. The comparison to the Conservative chaos of 2022 and 2023 is instructive, but not in the way Sir Keir thinks. Yes, the constant leadership changes were damaging. Yes, the instability hurt the country. But at least the Conservatives recognized when leaders had failed and removed them. Liz Truss lasted 4 to 9 days because her policies crashed the economy and her party removed her. That's accountability. What Sir Keir is arguing for is that Labour should stick with him regardless of performance, regardless of polling, regardless of electoral consequences, because changing leaders would be chaotic. That's not stability. That's stubbornness. That's prioritizing his own position over the party's electoral prospects.